Greetings, guys. Genghis Shakhan from Shakhan and Wilkerson Law Firm. Thank you for joining me. Today's topic, we are discussing things that essentially might be really, really important to parents or guardians, and that is going to be we're going to discuss DFACS. We're going to talk a little bit about just giving you a quick roadmap of what we'll discuss. We'll talk about DFACS. We'll talk about what DFACS investigations are, dependency hearings, what that might look like. Juvenile court, if your case does make its way to juvenile court, what that might look like, if the judge gets involved, if there are orders, and then if your matter is adjudicated, your child is deemed dependent, what that might look like in terms of a roadmap to or a pathway to reunification. So thank you for joining us. As always, go to the link in our bio if you'd like to schedule a consultation with us. We do take on defects cases all the time. We'd be more than happy to hold a consultation with you and see if we're a good fit and see if that, maybe we can help you out. Okay. All right. So let's dive right into it. Let's talk a little bit about understanding defects and get investigations. So the first thing you have to understand is that defects is actually an acronym. Okay. And so it is Division of Family and Children's Services. Division of Family and Children's Services here in the state of Georgia. Of course, depending on where you are, what state you're in, there are other child protective agencies, and they go by different names, but that is what DFACS here in Georgia, what it stands for. And it is essentially what I just said. It is a child protective service agency. They serve families, and they serve children. And their primary role, they're responsible for investigating allegations of abuse as well as neglect. And so they are protecting children who they believe might be unsafe. And they do provide family services as well. Okay. So they coordinate with foster placement. They also work hand in hand with the juvenile courts, right? And so if your matter is essentially goes forward beyond the investigation, you may find that the juvenile courts do get involved in your case, and you might be standing tall before a judge as well. All right, now let's talk about why defects may actually get involved in your case. Okay, and so usually defects becomes involved after there is a report of abuse or there is a report of neglect. But it can also be, and so that might center around drug use allegations by the parents or the guardians, domestic violence allegations, unsafe home allegations, and I'm saying allegations because that's exactly what they are. It's what's alleged. Educational neglect, medical neglect. So sometimes, these defects cases can get started in a hospital or in a therapy session. All of that is possible. A lack of supervision, abandonment, criminal arrest, as well as a mental health crisis. Okay. And so all of these things are ways that defects might become involved in your case. Okay. And so some of these reports, many of these reports, they actually start from schools and hospitals. Okay. And we'll talk a little bit about mandated reporters here in a moment. But sometimes a teacher, an educator, a school official, school counselor, as well as hospital could be a nurse or a doctor. They may be the reporter, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about why they are duty bound to report cases where they suspect abuse or neglect, okay? So, mandatory reporters, what are they? So, Georgia law requires that certain professionals must report suspected abuse or neglect, okay? And so, some examples are going to be just the ones that I covered: teachers, doctors, nurses, therapists, counselors, can be clergy, daycare workers, social workers. There's an extensive list: law enforcement, foster parents, as well as CASA volunteers. CASA is another acronym. It can be court appointed special advocates, and they might become involved in your case, maybe through the juvenile court or through DFACS. And then, of course, there's going to be certain court personnel as well as attorneys, okay, certain attorneys, okay. And so those are going to be your mandatory reporters, and so they're going to a lot of times be the source of the party that make contact with the defects agency, or actually just drafted a report. The police can get involved in this as well, and it might be reported to the police as well. Okay. All right. So what happens after this report is made? We're going to be talking about the initial screening process. Okay. So as you can imagine, there are a lot of allegations. There are a lot of reports that come out, and DFACS has to screen those reports. Okay. They have to make sure some are credible, some, may not be. One of the reasons why these are screened is, again, because, there are occasionally false reports. Okay. And I won't do a deep dive into this, but sometimes we see parties that are in custody disputes, sometimes parties that are going through divorce, or they are in child custody battles. They will make allegations of abuse against one another, and they will do so either to kind of one up themselves, so and maybe give themselves some leverage in the custody fight, or they might just do so just to initiate some form of malicious prosecution against their soon-to-be ex or their ex-spouse. Okay. And so that happens. I wish it didn't happen as often as it does, but it does happen. And so that's one of the reasons, amongst many, because sometimes people, believe there might be neglect, or believe there might be abuse where there is none. Okay. Maybe, a minor child plays, a very, very physical extracurricular activity, and might come to school with bruises. I can think of, as a child, I participated in taekwondo, karate, and so when I did, it wasn't unusual to come to school with a black eye, right? If I had participated in a competition over the weekend. Okay. And so, or maybe someone is training for UFC fighting, or someone plays football, or someone boxes, and so it might be, one of those situations where there might be some bruising, scarring, that might be associated with something that is not abuse or neglect related. Okay. So that is the purpose for the screening, to find out which are the credible and situations where there might be abuse or neglect. All right. So the report is going to be screened out through DFACS, and an investigation will be determined whether or not they're going to investigate, or whether it's something that they elect not to investigate. Okay. So if it does go to the investigator, what happens is, or what can happen, and it can be one of these things can happen, a myriad of these things could happen, or it can be none of them happen. Right, it just really depends on the case. Right, every case is different. So there might be a home visit, there might be a visit with your children. There might be a visit with educators, counselors. They might request drug tests from the guardians or from the parents. They can inspect your living conditions, right? Inspect the home. They can speak with relatives, review medical records, and they may also coordinate with the police. So all of these things are within the realm of possibility. And again, they can all happen. Just a couple of those things can happen, or none of them may happen. It just really depends on the case. Really depends on the situation. Okay, and so let's move and talk a little bit about some common abuse accusations, and that's going to include physical abuse, emotional abuse, obviously, and then sexual abuse. Okay, so the ones that our office sometimes sees are going to be physical and sexual abuse. Okay, those are the ones that we see, that where folks, parents, might reach out to us where there are allegations of either of those things. Okay, physical abuse, or even neglect. We see a lot of neglect, and I'll talk about neglect here, where of course, the agency may be alleging that there has been some form of neglect. Okay, neglect allegations can include an unsafe home, inadequate supervision, failure to provide medical care, substance abuse or exposure, as well as educational neglect, as well as abandonment. Okay. And so that is the neglect kind of allegations that can rise in these type of cases. And so you have the two, abuse as well as neglect. Now, if your child is deemed dependent, let's talk a little bit about dependency and what dependency actually is. Dependency involves allegations that a child lacks either proper parental care, or a child is abused and neglected, or they are abandoned, or they are in a unsafe, or they are unsafe in their current environment. Okay, and so some of this can stem from, for example, let's just say that the custodial parent is incarcerated, and the minor child can be young, can really be left alone. Okay, defects may get involved in that situation. They likely will, or just situations again of abuse or neglect. It's alleged that maybe like one parent, that custodial parent, or both parents. I've seen it all, where someone is engaging in criminal activity, okay, where maybe there is illicit drug use happening around the minor children, okay. All of those things can trigger a defects investigation, and if it does, then you can find yourself in the throes of a dependency hearing, which is going to involve the juvenile court. So, as you recall, back at the beginning, at the outset, when I was going through the roadmap, I mentioned the juvenile court. So let's do a little deep dive into juvenile court. So if the juvenile court becomes involved, congratulations, your matter has gotten just a little bit more complex, and of course there are going to be more eyes on your case, not just defects, but the court as well. Okay, so the juvenile court, what they can do is, usually they move pretty quickly as well. They can approve emergency removals, right? So a child can be removed from a home. They can hold dependency hearings, place children in foster care, as well as order services for parents as well. And then they can also approve reunification plans. And we'll talk a little bit about reunification here shortly. Restrict visitation. And in the most harshest of circumstances, they can terminate parental rights. Okay. And so that can absolutely happen. Now, juvenile courts have a lot of authority over dependency matters. And so, one thing I do want to discuss is the emergency removal of children. Okay, because again, that is it can be quite emotional. And again, if the state is involved in removing your child, there's probably been some pretty egregious allegations. And obviously, you have been reported to maybe to defects, and they have deemed it uh maybe imperative that the court get involved. Sometimes the police are involved and will show up to remove that minor child from your care. Okay, so children might be removed if defects believes that the child is in immediate danger, that the child is unsafe, that the safety is being jeopardized by the caregiver. Okay, and so it might become essential for removal. In those situations where a minor child is removed, parents do have due process. Okay, and so there is a hearing, and it's usually called a PPH, preliminary protective hearing, and that usually is triggered. You get a few days in which the court will go ahead and hear your case. And at this hearing, this is what happens. The court will decide a few things. One is going to be whether or not the removal of your child was actually justified. That's the most important thing. And then, secondly, whether defects should continue to have custody over your child. Okay. And then, whether relatives are available, what temporary visitation might look like, and what the immediate safety concerns are for your child. Okay. Now, what are dependency hearings? So, that this is kind of what I'm giving you is I'm giving you again a essentially really a roadmap of what to expect if your case is investigated, if your matter is deemed egregious, or is the allegations are substantiated. Egregious, of course, is it really depends on the person, and it's at the discretion of the judge as well as the defects investigator. And if so, what that plan might look like for you, in terms of having your matter adjudicated, okay, in juvenile court. So we talked about the PPH. Now we're talking about dependency hearing. So at the dependency hearing, the court is going to determine whether or not your child is legally dependent. Okay. And that whether defects intervention is necessary and whether foster care should actually continue. Okay. So again, dependency is going to basically what will happen is the court will review a few things. They'll look at testimony. They'll look at other evidence. They'll look at defects reports, school records, medical reports, as well as parent progress. All right. Now, if your child is determined to be dependent, okay, meaning that perhaps those allegations were substantiated, right? Whatever it is, the allegations of abuse or allegations of neglect were substantiated, then you might find yourself in a situation where your child is going to be recommended that they go to foster care, some form of foster care. And so foster care might occur when the parent cannot safely care for the minor child, and the suitable, maybe suitable relatives, they cannot be located, and the court orders removal. So maybe in the terms of relatives, maybe the relatives that have been located, maybe their living conditions are not um, um, proper, or maybe they have failed, of course, some form of drug screening or background checks. That can essentially lead to your minor children being placed and be a temporary basis in foster care. Okay. So Georgia law states that foster care should generally be temporary while safety concerns are being addressed. Okay. Now, I'll talk a little bit about relatives. So let's talk about kinship care, relative care. Courts often prefer placement with family members or relatives. That includes grandparents, aunts, uncles, adult siblings, as well as trusted relatives. And this is commonly called kinship care or relative placement. Okay, and so oftentimes that is a suitable alternative to placing a minor child in foster care with someone they may not know. Okay, so again, just really depends on your situation. Now, reunification, I mentioned that earlier. Let's talk about what reunification is. And it's essentially what everyone wants to see happen. That includes the courts as well as defects. And the reunification simply means returning of the children safely to parents after all of the safety concerns have been addressed. And I'm going to say after those safety concerns have been addressed. Okay. And usually there is a plan in place to address those safety concerns. Again, this is all after your child has been deemed to be dependent. Okay. And so reunification normally is the primary goal. And but what it might require, okay, doesn't mean that there won't be a lot of work involved, because it can be an uphill battle for parents to be reunified with their minor child. Parents might be ordered to complete parenting classes, which is not unusual. Submit to drug screenings. You're probably going to be asked to submit to drug screenings, as well as attend therapy, obtain stable housing, obtain stable employment, complete substance abuse treatment. If you're struggling with codependency or substance abuse, attend anger management, participate in supervised visitation. If there is, allegations maybe of abuse, maybe you're going to be supervised, right, in your visitation with the minor child or minor children, and then following the court case plans. Okay. All right. Now, here is what courts look for while before they reunify minor children with their parents. So judges, and it's important that you know this is going to be judge. This is not going to be a jury. Okay. So a judge is going to look for consistency, sobriety, safe housing, cooperation, stability, as well as parenting ability and child safety. Okay, those are things that judges are going to be looking for. And there's not an exhaustive list, but essentially they want to make certain that that child, in returning to that parent, is going to be safe. They're going to return to stable living conditions. The parent are going to have the resources to care and rear that minor child. Obviously they're going to be appropriately supervised. all of these things is what a judge and the court is looking for. Okay. Now, if you fail to essentially complete the case plan, that can lead you down a very different road. Okay. And obviously, you know where this road might lead to. It can be continued foster care, reduced visitation, non-reunification findings, and then permanent guardianship, adoption proceedings, and again, in worst case scenario, TPRs, which are a termination of your parental rights altogether. Okay, and so the last thing you're going to see are permanency hearings. Okay, and this is addressing the long-term needs of the minor child. And so the long-term permanent plan for the child is where we are when we kind of arrive at the permanency hearings. And here are the outcomes of the permanency hearings. You might be reunified with your child. Okay, that's the best case scenario. Or child might end up with a relative, and they may have custody. There might be guardianship. Your minor child can be adopted, and there might be some long-term foster care. Okay, and so you want to make sure that you're doing everything in your power to follow the case plan. If you're being told to go to therapy, you go to therapy. If you're getting told to participate in these drug screens, you're doing so. And you are making every effort. If you have codependency issues, you might get speak to your counsel. Okay, but you want to make sure that you're addressing what's going on with you and substance abuse. Otherwise, it might be a stumbling block for you in getting your children back. Okay, now here's how parents can fight defects accusations. It's no mystery that it appears a lot of times that the agency and Georgia parents, there is an adversarial relationship, right? That's how where attorneys make their money. Okay. However, here are some important steps for you to be mindful of if you find yourselves in this situation under a defects investigation. You do want to take the allegations seriously. Okay. And I can't emphasize that enough because many people they kind of play around with these allegations, but you need to take them very seriously. These are professionals, and everything is being documented. Okay, and so that's going to include things that you say as well as your conduct. Okay, don't assume the case will just disappear on its own. You want to stay calm and you want to cooperate. I would say if you are going through this process, you might have been assigned a court appointed attorney. If not, then speaking with your private attorney, they should provide you some guidance on how to essentially go through this process and cooperate. Right? You want to give the appearance of cooperating. Right? So that again, this doesn't surface at one of the hearings that you are not cooperating. Now, so aggressive and hostile behavior can absolutely 1000% harm your credibility. I've seen it many, many times, right? And so it's very hard to rehabilitate the character of my client if they develop a reputation for being uncooperative. You want to document everything. That's going to include text, emails, school records, medical records, visitation logs, therapy, completion certificates. If you've done a parenting class and you got a certificate, hold it, right? If you've gone through anger management and there's been a certificate, hold on to it. If you're communicating with defects personnel, yeah, make sure you log who you spoke with, what you spoke about, and the times and the dates. You want to essentially do the same thing that DFAX is doing in case you need to produce a counter narrative. Okay, that's going to be helpful for you. It's going to be helpful for your counsel. Okay, you want to follow the court's orders. The judges are routinely issue orders in these cases. The most obvious are going to be drug screening. You're going to submit to drug screens. Okay, you don't want to repeatedly fail these drug screens. Understand that sometimes they might do urinalysis. Sometimes it might be a hair follicle or blood. Okay. If you are routinely failing, that shows something to the judge. So you want to make sure that you are, again, this goes back to taking these proceedings very seriously if you are in this situation. Avoid social media mistakes. So you don't want to post anything that's going to become evidence, okay, in your case against you. All right. And so, we are in the age of social media. So that seems to be the toughest task that people have many times that I see. We represent clients in these cases is just keeping their nose clean on social media. Okay. Now, you want to maintain stable housing and employment as well. And of course, that's going to be, if that's your challenge, if you don't have the resources, you want to make sure that you do see if you can get some resources that are going to help your cause when it comes to making sure that your living conditions are stabilized. And then you want to complete those services as quickly as possible. All right, now just quickly as we start wrapping up, hopefully if you like this video, make sure that you show us that you like it by tapping the like button or the love button, heart button. We love that. In addition, if it's somebody that you have a family or a friend, or anyone that you know that might be going through a DFACS investigation, you feel like this is going to be helpful for them, make sure you share it. If you don't follow us, make sure you follow us because we offer a bunch of information on criminal defense, juvenile cases, as well as child custody, divorce, men's rights. And so you are doing yourself a disservice if you don't follow us. If you have a case and you need an attorney, okay, and you need an attorney, I'm going to reiterate that I'm a private attorney. Feel free to give us a call, or you can hit the link in our bio and schedule your consultation. We'd be more than happy to chat with you. All right, so here is when an attorney is a perfect segue when an attorney might be needed in your case, all right? Because bear this in mind as well. DFACS cases move a whole lot faster than most criminal cases in superior court, okay? Even or in state court, right? You'll find that the pace is a lot faster. And so you do want to have someone that is familiar with the terrain when it comes to helping you out, representing you in a DFACS matter or dependency case. All right. So an attorney might be helpful to help you as a parent protect your parenting rights, challenge weak evidence, right? So if there's weak evidence out there to help cross-examine witnesses, present favorable evidence, because sometimes that's lost, is your side of the story. Okay. Many times there are a lot of lawyers involved in these cases, depending on the case. You can have the state, who is usually the SAG, the special assistant to the attorney general, or if you have a criminal case, it might be a juvenile criminal case. It might be an ADA, which is the assistant district attorney. However, in dependency cases, so you have the SAG, you may have the GAL, the guardian ad litem. You might have your attorney might be present, and that could be a public defender. It can be a private attorney. In some jurisdictions, the child might even have an attorney. Obviously, the judge is more than likely has a law degree as well, and so there will be a bunch of lawyers involved in this case. And so a lot of times it's very helpful to have someone up there that is representing your interest, that has a law degree as well. Okay. Um, Now, an attorney can request relative participation, right? So if there's something going on with you, maybe the minor child can live with relatives so that their lives aren't completely upended. They can address false allegations. This happens quite often. I must say that there are false allegations, right? And sometimes the state still goes forward, even though the allegations are false. The judge doesn't know they're false. The judge doesn't know you personally, and so it's your counsel's job to, again, I talked a little bit about a counter narrative, to offer a counter narrative, right, and put that out there for you, okay? And then just basically they can just protect your loss of custody and all of your rights. Now, here are some, as I'm wrapping up here are some mistakes that we commonly see parents make. They are going to be ignoring defects, just ignoring them, right? Just kind of sticking like a stork, I think it is a stork, sticking your head in the sand, right? And just not paying them any never mind. Missing court dates, refusing services. So you're being told to go to these drug panels, you're being told to go to anger management, and you're just telling them to, take a hike. Failing drug tests, posting online about the case. So you might go to the drug panels and you're just not taking them seriously. Your urine is dirty, it's dirty, and you're not going to do anything to address it. Or you just some people choose unsafe partners, right? Your partner is there's allegations of sexual abuse with your partner and a minor child, and you're not addressing it, okay? And that person remains at your residence, okay? That's if you're not addressing it, then it still puts the child in a situation of being in harm's way, or just failing to communicate with your attorney. That's another mistake that we've seen happen. All right. So in the final takeaways, defects in juvenile courts, just keep in mind that their primary focus is child safety, child stability. That is what they're looking for. They're looking for risk reduction, and they're looking for a long-term solution. Okay. If you're in a kind of a loop of abuse and neglect, that's something the court is going to take into consideration. So parents who act quickly, remain organized, complete services, maintain stability, and obtain maybe some legal guidance are the ones that we see that are successful when it comes to these types of cases. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Make sure you stay tapped in with us, as I indicated and mentioned. Make sure you like and follow, and we'll see you. See you next time. Have a great evening.